So Mission Impossible 2 was directed by John Woo and it stars Tom Cruise once again returning as Ethan Hunt. And this time around when another IMF agent goes rogue, he has this he has this virus that he's going to unleash and he has the cure to a virus and now he's going to be the one who saves humanity and just basically just cause chaos. Ethan Hunt must stop him with the help of a woman who has a past with the man who's just trying to, save the world, who's trying to destroy the world and then kind of profit off it. So, Mission Impossible 2, I didn't see until like around the time Mission Impossible 5 came out. And I heard for so many years that it was the worst Mission Impossible movie. They had no idea what they were doing. And looking back on it, I can clearly see why this movie is both way too serious, way too goofy, in all the worst ways possible. What this movie is ridiculous. This movie is really ridiculous and definitely a very, very, very low point in the Mission Impossible series. So, is there anything in this movie that does work? A few moments are decent, like the acting is fine overall. I can't really complain about the acting too much in this movie because it's not terrible by any means. I think everyone in this movie does give a good performance, but there's nothing really that really stands out about it. And the action itself is fine. Like the opening scene when Ethan Hunt is just climbing those rocks. It's cool and all, but it's pointless. Like, there's no reason for him to do this other than to show that Tom Cruise is really strong and he can do all these things. And yeah, we've seen him do a bunch of other crazy stuff in later movies, like hang off the side of a helicopter, jump out of planes, just run across the tops of buildings, and just do more death-defying things. And those actually had reasons to be in the movie, rather than this was just kind of pointless, other than just to show off how amazing Tom Cruise is. And the last 30 minutes are admittedly pretty fun, even though they are definitely over the top and absolutely ridiculous. So, what don't I like about this movie? Pretty much everything else about this movie I just can't stand. The villains are kind of just generic bad guys. They do nothing for me. I felt bad for the main villain played by Dougray Scott because he was supposed to be Wolverine, but then he dropped out of the first X-Men movie to be the villain in this movie. Yeah, bad career move, dude. Really bad move. The villains are generic. They're not nearly as fun as some of the other villains, like John Voight in the first Mission Impossible movie, John Reno in the first Mission Impossible movie as well, even Philip Seymour Hoffman in Mission Impossible 3, which I'll talk about soon. None of the villains are interesting or fun, and they're just kind of just boring to me. Also, I don't really like some of the interactions with characters, like Ving Rhames in this movie. He's just wasted completely. Like, he has no real reason to be in this movie. He has, like, one scene that is a joke, and he steps in a pile of shit. And that's the big joke that he had in the movie. That's the best he could do? Seriously? Why? Also, Tom Cruise and Thandie Newton, their chemistry is just non-existent, honestly. I didn't buy it for a second. It just felt very forced, very contrived, and I just didn't really find it interesting whatsoever. And also, I found it incredibly convoluted with the whole fact that her character had a relationship with the main villain of this movie, which I thought was just absolutely ridiculous. And it was just like, oh, what a coincidence. Like, come on, are you serious? And I think my main issue with the movie is that it takes itself way too seriously. And I think it tries so hard to be ridiculous. It tries so hard to take itself seriously that the ridiculousness of it is just funnier to me. Like, there were so many moments in this movie where I just wanted to laugh at just how ridiculous this whole thing was. Like, the villain's whole plan is just absolutely insane. Like, why would you do this? And a lot of the stuff that John Woo is famous for, like the slow-mo scenes and just having doves just randomly appear and just all the zoom shots. It's like, why are you doing this? Like, this movie is just so crazy. There are just a lot of ridiculous moments, and it's just midly not as fun as I think it should have been. Like, there's this whole, like, the wiring, like, when Tom Cruise was being lowered in the first Mission Impossible movie, and that whole scene was just very intense, very well choreographed and such, and it was definitely very well done. So in this movie, there's another one where he's being lowered down, but he immediately just steps on the ground and everything's okay. Come on. That's just boring to me. You're telling me that this guy who was just climbing rocks at the beginning of the movie, it was just, that's it? That's really it? That's all you're going to do with him in this scene? Okay. There's just a lot of really ridiculous moments, like Ethan Hunt grabs a pair of sunglasses to listen to his mission, and then he just throws them and they just explode, and it reads the title MI2. Oh my god. There are so many moments where it's like ridiculous. Like there's this one scene where he's just hanging in a doorway and he just knocks out one of the henchmen in this movie. Ridiculous. There are so many moments where it's just completely illogical. Like there's like he's basically just riding his motorcycle in public where everybody can see him, and he's like dressed up like he's just came out of the Matrix and such, and everything is on fire around him. Like he just rides his motorcycle to catch up with the bad guy, and then they like wind up jumping into each other. It is insane. And a lot of the masking that they did in this, like in the first movie, they kind of do again. I kind of bought it in the first movie, but this one I kind of just don't buy it again. It's just not nearly as cool the second time around. And I feel like with this movie too, my biggest issue with it is that almost nothing happens in this movie for like an hour. This is a 2-hour action movie, and I feel like something should happen. I felt like nothing was really happening in this movie. Just no plot was happening, no action was going on. Like, what was the point of anything? Even like a lot of the humor too from the first movie was just sucked out completely, and the jokes that they did have in this movie were just atrocious. It is a pretty good John Woo movie, but at the same time, it's a pretty terrible Mission Impossible movie. Like, if this was something that was just done by John Woo, who just, does all these really ridiculous over-the-top movies like Face Off and such, it probably would have been a really awesome movie, but it's just not, because it's part of this whole franchise. And when you just realize like how ridiculous everything is in this movie, like unlike something like Face Off, which just played into the ridiculousness of it, this movie is trying to take itself so seriously that even when it does end up being when it tries to be ridiculous, it just looks even worse. I don't know if it even tries to be ridiculous. I think when they are trying to do something like, again, the cliches, it just looks absolutely stupid, and I'm just laughing at it. It's like these guys have two big egos, and they were like trying to mesh their two styles together, like John Woo's directing style along with Tom Cruise's personality at the time. Is like, this movie just didn't work. This movie was just kind of a disaster. It's watchable in the sense that like you could laugh at it and be like, okay, like why would you do anything that happens in this movie? Like, why would you do anything? This movie's dumb. This movie's really dumb, but in a fun way. But overall, Mission Impossible 2, the acting is fine. The first act, even though there's no point to it, and also the last 30 minutes of the movie are admittedly fun, but the villains are bland, the chemistry is bland, the jokes fall flat, the John Woo cliches are ridiculous, there are some illogical, ridiculous scenes, and I just felt like it was just too convoluted and too serious. Mission Impossible 2 is just a disaster, if you ask me. But kind of, you could watch this movie in like a so bad it's good kind of way, and it's just, it's the worst Mission Impossible movie. At least Mission Impossible 3, even though I don't love that movie either, at least that movie had some fun moments in it, which this movie does not. I'll give Mission Impossible 2 1.5 out of 4 stars. Stream it. They should have called this movie Mission Impossible 2000. Definitely would have fit a lot more. So, what's your least favorite Mission Impossible movie? Comment down below, subscribe to the channel. This is Pat. Stay safe.